All right. So anyway, back if you watched part one, we were like, what was the goal of the suffragettes? Again, the textbooks tells you it was all just getting equality for women, the right to vote, the equal pay, equal work, that kind of stuff. Prohibition. I mean, some of the stuff they were actually going for was good, but it was for the wrong reason. So they were, the suffragettes were for prohibition and stuff like that. Which, think of all the death and destruction out of the Prohibition era of the 1920s and 1930s. Just a little side note for a historic fact, the term bootlegger, if you didn't know where that came from, this was basically guys going from Quebec into the United States, crossing the bridge, and they wore big woolly boot, like the Woolies boots, big rubber boots, and they would hide and smuggle booze in their boots, hence bootlegger. So just so you know, from my province, we had quite the prohibition up here as well, and the way they did it. Maggie Brown, she was like the most notorious bootlegger up here in Canada from Montreal, and she came up to Wakefield, Quebec. And basically, the engineer, he would toot the train horn a certain way so everybody would know to hide their booze. So the inspector from Montreal would come along, and he would look for all the booze. And what he would find is a bunch of drunk people with no booze to be found because it was prohibition, it was illegal, right? And the inspector from Montreal fell in love with Maggie Brown, the number one bootlegger in the area. So anyway, very fascinating local history, but apparently we don't have any culture like that. But there's a lot of tons of great stories like that. But anyway, back to the suffragettes. So the suffragettes had a lot of different agendas. And it wasn't long before first wave feminism, which was based solely on a cult, but never promoted as that, it was always promoted as something else, kind of got spearheaded around World War One, definitely the end of World War Two, where you had Rosie the Riveter, which kind of got rid of the the Lilith cult thing was well hidden by this time, and it was just, no, we want women to do this, women to do that, and be able to do anything a man can do. Anything a woman can do, a man can do, a woman can do better, in a dress, on a skateboard, going backwards on a Sunday. But what it really was the powers that be said, hey, all these women building like B-24 Liberators and Admiral Lancasters and Spitfires and Mustangs and tanks and all kinds of stuff like that. If we were to get those women into the workforce, right, as a full-time, we could half the labor and pay lower wages. You see it with certain things going on right now, which I don't want to mention. You guys can use your imagination. But just a lot of people flooding in on the job market. We'll just say keep it like that. And that does drop your wages. It always has. It always will. Because now, when you used to be able to bargain, say, hey, I'm the only guy that can do that for you, now there's 80 other people that can do that. Now, when you took half the population that was working and said the other half the population has to go to work. Problem was, women didn't really want that. In fact, most women did not agree with the suffragettes, right? They didn't agree with them. So they wanted to stay home and raise family and stuff like that. Not every woman had it bad, so they sold the 1940s, 1950s, and we'll say the silent generation, which is like the World War II generation, World War I, World War II generation, and the baby boomers were sold on the idea that women were just so oppressed in the household in the 1950s and stuff. They didn't enjoy it at all. Everything was just bad. It was just horrible for women to be, staying at home all the time, taking care of the children, and have to cook a meal for a man, everything like that. So second wave feminism was rebellious, but it wasn't as rebellious as what we're experiencing now. So Rosie the Riveter's, the war's done. Rosie the Riveter goes back to the kitchen. She doesn't like it. Some like it. It's a little bit more the feminist idea thing is starting to catch on a bit more, and the girl power movement thing starts to, plant a seed there. Okay, so second wave feminism, you see this up to about, say, mid 1980s. And this is, Dolly Parton's 9 to 5. Okay, we're going to get the woman. And the thing is about the whole woman at work thing, that's never not been a thing. You know what I mean? Like that's the part that blows my mind. It's like there's people now that believe that women have never worked up until after up to the 1950s. No, it was the majority of women that didn't work. Well, I don't want to say didn't work, because up to the 1950s, even the 1960s, most women lived in rural areas like most men did, and most of them lived on farms, in Canada, the United States, that kind of. And if you were a farm girl, you fucking worked. You know what I mean? Whether you're male or female, if you live on a farm, you work. So I don't want to say these women didn't work. It's just they were housewives. They were homekeepers. And that was very noble, although they didn't get paid for their labor directly. The argument was, women doing all this labor around the house, taking care of it, and they don't get a paycheck. Well, they did get a paycheck. The paycheck was called their husband. You know what I mean? And that paycheck had to carry the husband, the wife, the children, whatever. And this was kind of, really just a back channel. But what the argument then became was, yeah, but the men are controlling the money. I don't really know about that, because my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my mom, God rest her, whatever, I don't ever remember seeing my grandmothers, great-grandmothers, or my mom, or aunts, or whatever, not say, hey, fork over some money, I got to go do this. The dads would always, yeah, here, just go take care of whatever you got to take care of. You know what I mean? The money thing, I don't really see that as, I'm sure you could find examples one way or the other, but in general, no, when you had a partnership, the two-step between man and woman, there had to be cooperation, obviously. You couldn't just go spend stupid, because your kids would starve, right? And the generations before, like mine, Gen X, like the boomers and stuff, they, you complain a lot about the boomers and some of the stuff they get, some of the stuff they don't get, some of the, the wealth they got and stuff like that. You can complain on that. There's a fly on my screen. Sure, but one thing you can't complain about is how they took care of the family. In general, most boomers were very, very good parents, in general. Stupid fly. Because yes, you could say, oh, but there was abuse and stuff in the households. When has there never not been abuse in households? There's still abuse going on in households nowadays. It's just people have less kids, so you see a little bit less of it. But the abuse just goes to partner, to spousal, rather than to the kids. And even at that, most kids grew up, the boomers had slightly stricter parents, but most of those dads were in World War II, so I'm sure there was a lot of PTSD and stuff like that as well. But in general, no, most people throughout history, their parents take good care of the kids. You know what I mean? In general. There's always going to be a sect of the population that's a shit show, Jerry Springer, not take care of the kids well. But anyway, I'll make part 3.